Jesus preaches against greed because the choice before us as we hear this gospel text and the one from Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanity, all is vanity, is that we need to make a decision. Do we live life by receiving the blessings that come to us as gifts, or do we pursue possessions? And there's a difference between the two. When in fact one sees life as a blessing, then there's always a life full of wonder and surprises, that God in some way continues to be a part of our life, and those blessings keep coming time after time. But a person who pursues possessions, after a while, becomes bored with them. There is a kind of, the French word ennui that sets in which we find ourselves thinking as though we're fulfilled by the things we have, but something is lacking. And so the choice is, do we live a life of wonder and surprise, or one of possessions in which we ultimately become bored? The second thing that we see is that a life that's lived appreciating and receiving blessings makes us generous, because we know that God's blessings continue in our life, and so we should not be afraid. But the person who in fact thinks that the possessions in their life define who they are and in fact are finite is very not only selfish but fearful, becomes enslaved by those possessions because they define his life, and he's afraid to share them with others. It's a life of generosity or a life of fear and enslavement. And finally, we see that the person who lives a life of blessings is willing to connect with others. A life is full when we do connect with other people. But the person who pursues possessions isolates themselves, lives apart from others, not wanting others to make demands on them, and so they live a life of isolation. It's interesting that Jesus gives us the picture of the person who's greedy as having benefited from the harvest of the good earth. This man had nothing to do with that. It came from the earth that, as a blessing that was given to him, and yet he doesn't appreciate it. He takes the harvest as his possessions. And the harvest is food. Food by its very nature should be shared with others, bringing people together in a convivial life. But instead, this man is possessing the food that's there only for himself. Eat, drink, and be merry, he says. But God reminds each one of us that when we live our lives as a blessing, we really pursue the things that really matter to God. A sense of wonder about our lives, a generosity to others, and being connected in community with others. But when we do not, then we live a life that ultimately is boring, that's enslaving, that also isolates us from others. That is not what matters to God. So today, as we celebrate the Eucharist and hear this very powerful message to avoid greed in our life, let us respond in a way that opens our eyes to the many wonders in our lives that come by God's blessings, and not be afraid to be generous with others, but also so that when we are generous, we connect with others in a way that enriches our lives and realize that we are doing what matters to God.